Good morning, passengers. Welcome to Martel Air. My name's Amanda, and I'll be your pilot for today. We're just beginning boarding for flight number 23 from Townsville to Cairns. So grab your seats while I finish up the last steps of the pre-flight inspections of this Cessna Grand Caravan, the pride of the Martel Air fleet. Before engine start checklist. Pre-flight inspection complete. Parking brake handle set. Electrical system switches off. Ignition switch normal. Fuel tank selectors both on. Bleed air heat switch off. Power lever idle. Prop RPM max. Fuel condition cut off. Fuel shut off knob fully in check. Battery switch on. Cabin lighting on. Cockpit lighting set. Wing flaps up. No smoking light on. Before engine start checklist complete. Co-pilot confirm. Thank you. Good morning, passengers. The weather today is doing its best to ignore the fact that it is currently winter. And we'll be flying at cruising at an altitude of about 6,000 feet today. Flying over, as I check my notes, the Palm Islands and Hinchinbrook Island en route to Cairns. Your cabin crew today is me, assisted as always by my co-pilot, Wing Commander Lamington. And your emergency exits are located to the back of the cabin where you entered the plane. I also have a door up here by me, so if you see me leave, please follow me quickly. Our in-flight catering services are provided by our wonderful passengers, so I hope you packed something interesting. We also have a Ko-fi machine in the back, linked in the description, for those who'd like to support the channel and Wing Commander Lamington's dog treats habit. Engine start checklist. Battery switch on. Beacon lights on. Avionics 1 on. Bus faults check. Emergency power lever normal. Inertial separator handle bypass. EIS readings. All readings active. Propeller area clear. Fuel boost switch on. Fuel boost on shown check. Fuel pressure low not shown check. Fuel flow 0 check. Starter switch start. Ignition on shown check. Oil PSI registering check. NG stable. Fuel condition lever to low idle. Fuel flow and expected range check. NG climbing. NG stable. Starter switch off. EIS readings check. Generator load check. Generator off not shown check. Battery amps positive check. Fuel boost switch normal. Avionics 2 on. Nav lights on. Engine start checklist complete. We're now ready for departure, so please fasten your seatbelts and turn off your devices apart from those used to watch this stream. Thank you for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Before departure taxi checklist. Taxi lights on. Seatbelt lights on. Taxi clearance. Let's see, it's basically a north departure. Townsville ground, Martel 23 with information on Quebec. Request taxi for takeoff, north departure. Taxiing, hold short runway 01 using taxiway Delta 1, Alpha 3, Alpha 2, Alpha 1, Martel 23. Taxi clearance check. Nav source set. Prop RPM to minimum. Fuel condition low idle. Inertial separator bypass. And parking brake off. Before departure taxi checklist complete. And the temperature in Townsville Airport today is apparently 22 degrees Celsius, which is, as I said, doing its best to ignore the very existence of winter. But as we get up into the tropics, the entire notion of summer and winter makes less sense, really. Just an interesting little point of how seasons work, I guess. The notion that summer is when you're tilted more towards the sun and winter's when you're tilted more away from the sun. Well, when you're within the tropics, you're not actually tilted as much because you're in between the bit that's tilted towards and the bit that's tilted away. So essentially once you cross the tropics and go into the area between them, the intertropical zone, it's not so much summer and winter as the rainy season and the wet season. Wait, I just said rainy season and wet season. That is not the seasons. Wet season, dry season. I mean, I'm sure there are places with a rainy season and a wet season. I think it's called England. Well, come to think of it, I think it was exactly 22 when we landed as well. When we pull up ready for our before takeoff checklist, I will be running some system checks just to double check things. In case I messed up the settings while setting up for that is the runway there, so we hold short on this line. Parking brake on. Just quickly double checking in case when I set up for the checklist special I screwed something up, but no, we are exactly where we should be. Lovely, forgive that interruption. Before takeoff checklist, parking brake set, altimeter QNH, load from system set, standby flight instruments, check. Fuel boost switch, normal. Fuel tank selectors, both on. Fuel quantity, check. Fuel shut-off knob fully in, check. Standby alt power, on. Anti-ice system, not required. Autopilot preparations. Altimeter altitude set for initial planned cruise of 6,000 set. Flight level change mode engaged and set for VY. Heading mode engaged and set for a runway heading. Check. And bank mode engaged for passenger comfort. Autopilot prepared. Nav source is currently set. Transponder on alt. Flaps to takeoff position. Takeoff clearance. Townsville Tower, Martel 2-3, holding runway 01, ready for departure to the north. Cleared for takeoff, runway 01, Martel 2-3. Takeoff clearance check. Strobe lights on, landing lights on, taxi lights off, seatbelt lights on, parking brake release. Prop RPM to max, fuel condition high idle. Before takeoff checklist complete. Inertial separator handle, I missed. Did I miss the inertial separator handle step? Yes, I did. Whoops. Between the autopilot and the anti-ice, it got skipped with the anti-ice system set up, but it is now fixed and lined up on the runway, and we ease the power forward. Little bit of a wind. Tower, Martel 2-3, continue for north departure acknowledged. Okay. Flaps up. And gaining speed. Engaged. As we begin our climb out from Townsville International Airport. Oof, and there's somebody up there going a lot quicker than us and a lot higher. So as we come out of the bay, first thing that we are met with is Magnetic Island, which we also met on the way in and did our very best not to run into accidentally. And we managed to not hit it despite it being exactly on the flight path for coming in. Okay, 2,000 feet above airport elevation, landing lights off. Going to 126.8, Martel 23. Townsville approach, Martel 23 is type Cessna Caravan, 4 miles northeast of Townsville, 2,600 feet, request clearance to transition Charlie airspace. Squawks 3655, Martel 23. Cleared through the Charlie airspace, Martel 23. And as we come out, let's twist that heading over to our intended navigational schemes. As we see the lovely and picturesque tropical waters, and I do believe we're starting to get towards the parts that are actually covered in rainforest. It's always a bit of a battle in Australia between the tropical rainforest and the standard Australian tendency to not rain, because it is quite dry here. Okay, cruise climb checklist, anti-ice not currently required, inertial separator handle normal, airspeed set to VY, power lever set for cruise climb 98%, prop RPM set to 1900, ITT within acceptable climb range. Cruise climb checklist complete. And Wing Commander Lamington, how do you feel about the situation? Lovely. You are the goodest co-pilot. It's a little bit quiet in the passenger cabin today, but that is quite alright. I am, as we've seen on many a flight before, quite capable of rambling enough to keep myself and any later viewers entertained for the length of a flight. We're expecting about an hour and 20 minutes in the air today. That is slightly extended by my picking a slightly more scenic route as we go up the coast. So our first destination along here is Palm Island, which is another one of those wonderful, we named it for what was on it, islands that Australia has. Which, given that, and you know, it is not the other Palm Island in Dubai, that one is much sillier. I'm not saying that Palm Island, Australia is any more sensible, but it's less silly. That, I'm sure, made sense at some point. But yes, the island group is also the Palm Islands. Although I hope that one of the other islands in the group is not named for what was found on it, as that is Orpheus Island, which is a slightly ominous sort of implication. Oh, there we go to our cruise altitude. So, cruise checklist, seatbelt lights off, anti-ice not required, inertial separator handle normal, power to 87%. Just easing that back gently. Prop RPM to 1750. Lovely. Fuel balance check. ITT range very much in the pleasant sort of range. Excellent. So yes, I am hoping that Orpheus Island does not in fact contain Orpheus or the path to the underworld. So apparently the large island in the Palm Islands is Great Palm Island. That makes some sense. Oh, and this listing also includes their indigenous names, which is always something we like to see. So, Great Palm Island is Bulkcoleman, BWG at the start, which my initial inclination would be to try to pronounce it Welsh, which it is not. And Orpheus Island is Gulbody, and is the one with a national park, a research facility, and a tourist resort. That's quite a mix. But apparently the government facilities are on Great Palm Island. Ooh, we've got some traffic that they've said to watch out for. That is not in sight. Always an interesting one. Martel 2-3, traffic is not in sight. But luckily they are flying the opposite direction. We were both told to look to our 9 o'clock, so they are 4 miles off the left wing, heading in basically the exact opposite direction, so I think we're okay to have not seen them. They're also 4,000 feet away. So, on a previous stream, it was suggested that I need to actually come up with names for the aircraft in the Martel Air Fleet, which my initial inclination with that is to try something in Welsh, and also I'm rather a fan of names that just say what the thing is. So, I can't name it Caravan or anything like that in Welsh. Oh, why did that come up? That is not the correct thing to be coming up. The joys of... Okay, so what we saw there was some cosplay work that I was poking at this morning. And that should not have come up on the stream, but unfortunately I had Inkscape open on that monitor. Go to 120.55 Martel 23. Goodbye. Brisbane Centre, Martel 23, entering your airspace, 6,000 feet. As I was saying, working on a Star Wars Avatar crossover cosplay, so when I'm drafting up the plans for how to make the prop for it, that involves a lot of work in Inkscape for me, and that was on the left monitor. And unfortunately there is some glitchiness with trying to get OBS to stream a single application when that application is Flight Sim. So in fact, the main feed for this is just left monitor. So you'll occasionally just get little weirdnesses there. For other simpler, not full screen plus apps or programs like Little Nav Map, which I'm using down in the bottom left corner there, it's just fine to pull in as the program is the video source. But when it is something more complicated like Flight Sim, it's easier to just set it to monitor. And when I was clicking between screens to try and check something, it opened that up full screen instead. So you got a little peek at how to my process and progress through designing a modified T-21 light repeating blaster prop from Star Wars. For those who are curious about the cosplay thing, I am working on my first ever cosplay. Medieval recreation does not count in my mind for reasons that are complicated and probably spurious, but there is something different about it to me. So the first ever cosplay that I am attempting to create is Avatar Kyoshi from Avatar The Last Airbender, as if she was a Mandalorian from Star Wars. One of the prime drivers of this is I love the character of Kyoshi, and also, as somebody who is on the taller end of things, she is a good character for me to go with. But, due to some complicated things, I cannot have any makeup anywhere near my eyes, which not only rules out Kyoshi in general, as her look is very much full painted face in Chinese theatre paints, but basically any cosplay where your face is showing, it's recommended to have at least basic stage makeup to make everything a bit more cohesive. So as I can't do that, and also with the whole wearing glasses thing, it gets a little more complicated. But if I'm doing a Mandalorian character, they've got the helmet on, and the helmet's one of the cool things. So the helmet will be decorated with something heavily based on Kyoshi's face paint and headdress, and then Mandalorian style armor based on a mix of Kyoshi and Earth Kingdom in general, and specifically the Kyoshi warriors that she founded, which is actually where we first meet the concept of Kyoshi. And here we have Great Palm Island and the Palm Island's airport, or, you know, it's at least an airstrip, doing the here's a bit of flat land and we can have clear approaches by having them have water at each end, so a little bit small. And then this longer one over here is Orpheus Island. And we are definitely into the tropical paradises again. Yeah, so as Avatar Kyoshi does not wear armor, but the Kyoshi warriors do, I'm using the Kyoshi warriors as the inspiration for the armor sections of it. And it's all just starting to come together. So one of the things I had to decide is, would this character carry a blaster, the standard Star Wars gun? And if so, what would it be? And I thought of, trying to do something heavily based on the fans, which are Kyoshi's signature and also Kyoshi Warrior's signature. And then I realised, but this is in Star Wars. Avatar Kyoshi would 100% have a blaster. One of the main forces in the later parts of the main storyline telling Aang that no, you should just kill Fire Lord Ozai. Only justice can bring peace. No, she would be 100% down with having a blaster, and a big one. So in canon, Avatar Kyoshi is something like 6'5". I am only 5'9", but still, I am above average height for my general demographics. And here we come to the turn above the Palm Islands, and there's the township on Great Palm Island and the local government facilities. It's always good to have the at least somewhat central place where things are actually happening. So yes, the T-21 light repeating blaster is the biggest thing carried as a rifle by stormtroopers in the original trilogy. Everything bigger than it is an emplaced weapon. So, the E-Web blaster, etc., etc. Now, an interesting thing about almost all of the blasters in Star Wars is that the props are made by modifying real guns. Like, you get deactivated actual firearms and you stick sci-fi things on them. So one of the more famous cases is the heavy blaster pistol carried by Han Solo, the one with which he shot first. That is a Mauser C96 pistol, which has the barrel cut short, the flash suppressor from a machine gun attached, and some sci-fi cooling fins attached over what had been the inbuilt magazine. Now, classic gun collectors who love the Mauser C96 hate Star Wars fans, because Star Wars fans keep making perfectly screen accurate replica props by getting actual Mauser C96, cutting the barrel short and sticking on some sci-fi things. Oh, and also a telescopic sight from a rifle on a pistol. Han Solo's blaster is very silly. Now, I am not using an actual firearm for my blaster because 1, legal problems, 2, convention rules, 3, they're very heavy, especially if you're making a T21 light repeating blaster, because, like, even if I had a gun license, I couldn't get the gun this thing's based on. It is based on the Lewis gun, one of the standard machine guns of World War One. Let me see if I can pull up the stats on it. So this was used by basically everybody and in every war up to the 90s. Like, these were still being used. It weighs 13 kilos or 28 pounds. It is just over 50 inches or just under 1.3 meters long. So the thing I'm doing to create my blaster for this is, in fact, I've got a cutaway view of the American-made version model of 1917 of this type of gun, and instead of trying to replicate the prop and then do personalizations from there, what I've actually decided to do is, so, you know, I'm calling mine the TX21. I am taking the blueprints of the original Lewis gun and making my own sci-fi version of it. So, one of the notable things on the Lewis gun is it's got this very long cylindrical shroud over the barrel. Makes it look amazing for a sci-fi blaster because it's, you know, it's about this big. Narrows a little bit before the end of it, but I'm completely excluding that shroud because, having looked at the actual cutaway schematics of it, what we've got there is a series of 14 cooling fins attached to the barrel for almost its entire length, and then covered by this barrel shroud so that when the expanding gases come out the front of the barrel, they force it to suck air in. Like, it creates negative pressure just behind there as everything's rushing forward, and that sucks air in at the other end of this shroud, pulling the fresh air all the way along every one of these cooling fins. And on the T21 and on the Lewis gun, you can only just see the ends of some of these fins sticking out the back of the shroud. I'm just going to have those cooling fins completely visible because they look really cool and honestly quite sci-fi. Like, one of the ways you make a gun look sci-fi is you stick cooling fins on it. On the Lewis gun, they have those cooling fins because it's meant to fire 500 or 600 rounds a minute. I'm just gonna let it have the cooling fins. One of the places that these were often found, by the way, is they're one of the standard aircraft guns that you get. So it's the sort of gun you get for World War I dogfights. Quite cool. So I'm doing away with the barrel shroud, and the T-21 in the movies takes off the magazine. So the actual Lewis gun has a 20 centimeter across disc magazine, which let me see if we can find. That is a spam phone call trying to come in. I'm not answering that. I'm only talking to the air traffic control. So it has a 47 or 97 round pan magazine, which is essentially a 20 centimeter disc sitting on top of the gun, basically just above and forward of the handle, just behind the cool barrel things. So the Star Wars one leaves that off and just has the little post in the middle of it that it would mount to, because, you know, that makes it look all sleek and sci-fi. But my plan is in fact to include that pan magazine and fill it full of LEDs to make it look like a cool power cell. So that will be another little point of differentiation between the TX-21 for Mandalorian Kyoshi and the T-21 for Stormtroopers. And yes, this gun, like, I got the first stages of assembling it done last night, so the two main lengthwise sections, the barrel and the gas tube, are now attached to each other. And I have my first real sense of scale on this thing. It's big. I've moved where I'm planning on putting the front handle back quite a bit. So on the Lewis gun and the T-21, you essentially can just put your hand on the barrel shroud, but when it's cooling fins and then the gas tube out the bottom, those are less good for putting your hand on in use, so I'm going to be adding a front handle of some kind. I've moved that plan about half a meter back from looking at the blueprints and schematics and planning everything out to actually holding it and getting the proper sense of scale. Yet turns out I need that a lot further back than I thought. This thing's going to look impressive if I get the modelling and painting right. Okay, so looking outside the plane for a bit, here we have Hinchinbrook Island, which is very pointy. It has mountains. Look at it go. As has been previously stated, I have a lot less knowledge about the geography of Australia as we go further and further north, purely because I have never been anywhere near here. It's all very interesting, but look at that tropical wilderness that I'm sure somebody has done their best to ruin, but from this high looks relatively unspoiled. How lovely. So yes, the fun project of working out how to make this cosplay blaster that looks cool, looks sci-fi, and has the legally required "this is not a real gun" markings on it, and working out how much I want to integrate those into the design. So, like, the most basic one is you need the fluorescent orange tip, and I think how I actually want to do that is have it painted as part of the design, and also have Aurebesh markings saying something like danger, or perhaps this way towards enemy, to take the line from the Claymore anti-personnel mine, where it says front towards enemy. One of the things that I'm enjoying with planning this out is putting in all of these little references to various things. So once somebody gets the concept of this is a Mandalorian version of Avatar Kyoshi, which I'm hoping the helmet painting and design will be able to mostly do, once somebody's got that internalized, they can pick up on all of the little extra details that I've added. And I'm pulling on some Mandalorian sources, some general Star Wars sources, some Earth Kingdom from Avatar sources, some Kyoshi and Kyoshi Warrior specific sources, and also some Chinese cultural sources, because the Earth Kingdom is very much based on China. So, one of the things is that on the back of a Mandalorian helmet, a lot of the time, there is this interesting little, almost a grate panel, that is we never actually know what it's there for, but it's an interesting little design piece. So I've added one of those, but instead of the basic geometric shapes for it, I've taken the Chinese design, I believe it's pronounced Shu. I don't know the tone on that, so, you know, apologies to all Chinese listeners if I happen to be lucky enough to have any. But it is a traditional set of designs based on the character that means longevity, which, both for the Avatar and for Kyoshi specifically, longevity is a very relevant sort of phrase. So I have used that design element to give the little infill of that back panel on the helmet. And I'm thinking of having some writing on the helmet as well, which will be in the Mandalorian language and script. So the Aurebesh script, which is the standard Star Wars font, essentially, is just used for recording English. It's just a straight replacement. It's essentially a weird, non-standard English font. Technically Latin, but it's English. But the Mandalorian script, well, obsessive fans are a delight. So we in fact have a somewhat comprehensible Mandalorian language, Mando'ah. So I have translated one of Kyoshi's more central quotes, "Only justice can bring peace," into Mando'ah, and from there into the Mandalorian script. And my plan is to have the text of it written across the back quarters of the helmet, just to give it, like, those particular plates are very easy to become a bit too plain. So just putting some text there to make it a little bit more spice. I often use the word spice to mean extra little points of interest. If you're a Critical Role fan, it has nothing to do with do you spice, but with all of these sort of design decisions, I am asking myself, do you spice? There's some modelling that, you know, I'm sure in character they're probably reinforcement bands along the crown of the helmet, but they are 100% based on Avatar Kyoshi's headdress. And incorporating the Earth Kingdom symbol, which is the circle with a square in it, or a square with a circle with a square, which is the Chinese traditional coin also used as a good luck thing. And the Mandalorian Beskata Iron Heart, which is the diamond thingy from the middle of Boba Fett's breastplate that later designers decided was some key Mandalorian symbol. So integrating those together into a forehead plate looks rather cool. We'll see how it goes once it's textured and primed and painted. One of the lucky things about the painting process is that if I get to the end of putting all of the paint layers on and decide that it is utterly dreadful, I can paint over them. And if at some point the paint chips and shows off the previous draft, honestly, that's just character. Although one of the things is that in a lot of cosplay armor particularly, people love to do the weathered effect, making it look... Boba Fett's helmet is chipped up all to shreds as it is, but, you know, metal things have to have a little bit of, not quite rust, but there's some dirty grease here and there, and sometimes it is rust, and the paint's chipped, but that doesn't work specifically for Avatar Kyoshi as a Mandalorian, because this is somebody who goes into combat with immaculate, perfect face makeup and intense, complicated face makeup. So, at least on the helmet, I won't be doing the damage type of weathering. I'll be doing some shading effects to make the colours pop more, or I will be attempting to do these. I have not attempted this before. As I said, this is my first cosplay project. But we will see how I go with it. And I've also decided that I'm going to be decorating the inside of the helmet as well. Like, that needs to look proper. Because, like, I could just make it plain foam inside. Or I could make it look like the inside of a sci-fi helmet. Now, one of the interesting things for me is that I am a historical armor nerd, among many things. So I know real-world armoring things to a certain extent, and that is definitely colouring my approach to things. And it's also colouring what I'm planning on doing for light modelling things on this helmet. So I am planning on trying some foam clay-based modelling to add essentially the effect of a rolled edge on the helmet. So rather than coming to a perfectly flat edge, it has a little swell and then curve, which I think the extra bit of 3D that makes it look less like bits of 10mm EVA foam glued together, despite the fact that that's what it is. So all these little things should be an interesting little bit of extra stuff to it. One of the things that I am going to need to work out is if I'm decorating the inside so that even with the cap, even with the inside of it visible, it looks correct, is how I'm disguising, or no, not disguising, integrating the electronics, because I am putting some electronics in this helmet. There's two different options for a voice, not quite synthesizer, but in Star Wars, people with helmets on sound like they're speaking through a cheap microphone. So my current approach is that I have an absolutely basic belt-mounted loudspeaker system. So, you know, cheap microphone, cheap speaker, that makes it sound like I've got a Star Wars helmet on. It's a little bit bulky, especially, actually the headset's more of a problem fitting it inside the helmet and with the hood that I'm wearing. And also when I turn it on, it speaks to you in Chinese, because I bought the cheapest one possible, despite being from an Australian company. The audio prompts are in Chinese. When you turn it on, it says Chinese words that mean loudspeaker mode. And if you cycle through the modes, it's got Bluetooth mode and recording mode. I'm not entirely sure how each of these works, to be quite honest. It has an SD card slot and a USB port as well, so something. But while I was ordering the battery pack for the helmet, I also ordered the absolute cheapest, most basic electric microphone and small amplifier for it, and slimline speaker. So if I can get this second potential one to work, that would make it all integrated into the helmet and make it one battery instead of two for the system. If I'm using the loudspeaker pre-made one of the pockets on my utility belt will have Aurebesh text on it, done with the embroidery machine, that reads voice. And I'll just run the wire for that down underneath the clothes. But I'm also going to have going to 127.6 Martel 23. Goodbye. Brisbane Centre, Martel 23, type Cessna Caravan, 8 miles east of Yankee Delta Kilo India, 6,000 feet, request flight following. Squawk 4561, Martel 23. So I've got some LEDs that I'm going to be setting up as helmet-mounted torches, which we see... flashlights for the Americans, which we see occasionally in the Clone Wars when they're doing stuff in the dark. They are essentially mounted on the ear cups. I can't really gesture it properly with headphones on. Essentially mounting torches to where the headphones are at the moment. And those will be... My plan is to work out a low power mode where it's friendly for having on with people around, and a full power mode that will be actually functional torches, because I'm not doing anything by halves on this apparently. And the other thing that I am going to be building in is I've got a couple of side blowing fans, so 40mm squares, 10mm thick, absolutely tiny and kind of adorable, that run off... They're rated at 5 volts, they're getting 3.7 once this is set up. That will be blowing air across the visor to stop it fogging up and also give me a little bit of airflow inside. So it'll be interesting to see how those go. So the lights and the fans are already going to be running off a 3.7 volt LiPo battery. And if I can rework the voice mod to also work off this LiPo battery, like having pulled apart the pre-made one, apart from the speaker on it being a bit thick and it coming with its own separate LiPo battery, which is a much chunkier type. It's the... Why is this AA suddenly 3 times the size it feels like it should be? Let's climb up to 8,000 feet, get us there a little quicker, I think. And flight level change mode. 110, and give it a bit more beans. So yes, I might be able to essentially disassemble, take off the plastic case, and incorporate the pre-built one into the helmet. I may end up replacing its speaker with the one I've ordered that's a super slimline one, just because the thing about this helmet is that I'm inside it as well as the electronics. I'll need to work out how and where I'm mounting the speaker such that it's audible from outside but not super visible from outside. I'm not quite sure how I'll do that. I will be experimenting a bunch. Also, testing a voice mod like this where you need to be able to speak from inside the helmet and have the acoustic effects of it being on you, but also you can't hear the effect from outside. So it's a lot of time with the phone camera pointed at me with the video mode going, and walk away from it, test the speech, fiddle with the volume control, test the speech, try not to get it doing a feedback squeal. So it's a bit of a weird process. But if I can either do my own custom thing or heavily modify by ripping it apart the pre-built thing. The problem with using the pre-built thing will be keeping the extra processing and Chinese voice mode switching, which I don't need. I just need speaker, but having it all on one battery will be nice. So yes, I'm looking forward to experimenting with the electronics and working out how I can mount them, and how I'm doing the low power mode is going to be an interesting thing to discover, just because I've got at least 3 approaches in mind and I don't know which one will give the right balance. Oh, and the reason for having these torches on the helmet is in fact to represent the avatar state. So, you know, the eyes light up when you go into the I am in terrifying power mode. All of my previous incarnations are angry at you too. There was originally a thought of, oh, I could make the visor light up. That would be snazzy. And blind me. And not really work with a black visor. That's more for the white visors. So, I did buy some cheap light up panels. That could have been quite expensive light up panels if I bought them from one of the Etsy resellers. That might go like just in front of the eyes. They're 3cm circles, so about the size of my glasses. Behind the visor. Like, I'm going to fiddle with those and see if I like them as well. Maybe that's just like a second option that's inbuilt at the same time. Who knows? But in general, I think having the functional lights on the helmet will be a better approach. I've been rather enjoying discovering that I can wire up basic electronic circuits like this and have them work and do fun and interesting things. My other major project with it has been LED lights that simulate the lighting effect of candlelight in terms of color and consistency, but brighter and without a fire hazard. So, if you get the 590 nanometer amber LEDs, that gives you the core frequency of candlelight almost perfectly. To get the actual effect of candlelight, you then need to add in 1900 watt very warm white LEDs. Most of the time you can only get down to about Kelvin, 1900 Kelvin. Most of the time you can only get down to about 22 or 2700, but those are still in the warm white. So working on the trying layered warm white and amber to give a much more functional, this is kind of like candlelight but sort of effect. And then you need the enclosure that makes it look, you know, not like a bunch of electronics haphazardly wired together by some amateur, which it actually is. And it turns out you get really good battery life out of a pair of AA's if you're doing this. Much better than commercial LED lanterns will do. I don't know why. Oh yes, the simulate candle flame by flickering a lot. That's not what candle lanterns look like. The whole point of the lantern is that it's a box that keeps the wind off. Candle lanterns basically don't flicker. They might a little bit occasionally, if you bump them especially, but in general, they're just... the whole point is keeping the wind off the candle so it doesn't flicker. Candles flicker when the flame is not entirely on top of the wick. This has been a really wide, varying sort of ramble. It's fun. But yeah, so the helmet electronics. So with the fans and the lights and possibly the voice mod, if I can integrate that. I'll also be working out, like, do I paint the electronics? How do I run the wires such that they look like that's where they would be on a real helmet? The battery pack will be mounted essentially behind my head in that bit where the helmet flares out slightly. And also one of the things I'm doing is that there's a wonderful kind of temperature sensor that is a normally closed circuit component that if it reaches 70 degrees or 50, 65, like various set temperatures, some of them will open at their set temperature, some will close at the set temperature. So a normally open and closes at 70 degrees would mean that if it hits 70 degrees from whatever it's pushed up against, it will turn on the circuit and presumably turn on some sort of cooling system like a fan. I've got a normally closed so when it hits 70 degrees and opens, it breaks the circuit, and I'll be having this pressed up against the LiPo battery just as a backup. So if everything goes wrong on this circuit and the battery starts to overheat, instead of it continuing to run, it will cut the power. So it's just going to be essentially on the line out for the power from the battery. I think I'm putting it on the positive side directly on the battery, but like the device itself, like originally I was planning on having these on the LEDs, but they're too big to fit on them really. So I will be doing them as a battery protection instead. But just in case the battery starts to overheat, because LiPo batteries can. They can also catch fire and almost explode. It's terrifying. If that happens, I will be throwing the helmet, because, as I said, it'll be about here. But, I carry a LiPo battery or lithium batteries of some kind in my pocket all the time, and much bigger capacity ones as well, because phone. So yes, it'll be interesting seeing how this goes. And yes, so planning out the mountings for all of the components, if I'm painting or covering each of the components. If I cover it, does that start to turn into a thermal problem? Like, I think the battery might, instead of having a foam cover, it might have a fabric slipcase that is attached in. Like, I want to be able to remove the battery for, sometimes you need to remove batteries. Brisbane Centre, Martel 23, request clearance to transit from Charlie airspace. Cleared through Charlie airspace, Martel 23. Ooh, a little bit hazy, lovely. And we are getting in, I believe we're getting in towards Cairns, which is what all of these interesting markers and airspaces on our map are. Battery safety thing. So yes, being able to remove the battery, one of the things, so basically the battery will be going to a pre-made USB charger for the battery, which has some protection circuits and that sort of thing that I am not messing around with trying to make myself when it's $4 to get the assembled tiny circuit board. So it will be going to that, and then from there is a USB-C connector, which will be very useful for charging the battery, and that will need to be accessible from basically, underneath the helmet. And the good thing about the charger circuit board that I chose is that it has outputs on it. So it has the ground wire, essentially the negative terminal, back to the battery. It has a 5 volts, which is only powered when it is directly from the USB cable, so not useful in most of my circumstances. It has VBAT, which is a direct access to the 3.7 volts from the battery, and it has a specifically limited voltage pickup. Just double checking the specs on it. I believe it's 3.3 volts. And it's also a limited amperage. Makerverse USB-C LiPo charger. Here we go. So yes, the regulated output is 3.3 volts, 200 milliamps max. So instead of giving the lights on their bright mode will be on the VBAT pickup, where they are getting 3.7 volts and able to pull down, if they want to pull down their full 700 milliamps each that they're rated for, then that's what they'll pull down. Means that I'll only have an hour or two of battery life, but I won't have the lights on full power for more than a minute at a time, really. So yes, one of my planned potential dim modes on the lights is going to be, instead of 700 milliamps each, you can go on the 200 milliamp combined circuit, which will be a much more controlled and dim lighting setup. But I don't know how dim that will end up being. There's a lot of non-linear stuff that goes on with LED circuits. So one of the other things that I have is a tiny chip that limits its throughput to 350 milliamps, or half the rated maximum on the LEDs. Oh, these are 3-watt power LEDs, by the way. They are very bright. Like, full power mode will be enough to function as torches, especially with the 10 and 30 degree optics that I've got to go on them as well. So yes, I will be testing what 350 milliamps between them looks like, but I have 2 of these chips, so I could in fact have it 350 milliamps to each, so they're each on half power, or they're each on quarter power if it's one between them, or they could be on probably about 1/6 power and a lower voltage if they're on the 3.3 volt regulated line. So I've got so many options with this, and I don't know which one will work best until I try it. So currently waiting, but luckily one of the things about soldering an electric circuit together is you can just rewire them endlessly to an extent if you solder neatly and desolder neatly. And yes, there's all sorts of little things I can fiddle with on both the charger board and the audio board that I've got. It's all very interesting and complicated, but also the most complicated parts of it, which are the maths about exactly how circuit stuff works. You don't actually need to know most of that to be able to make a functional circuit, because, I mean, for one thing, especially for LEDs, there are calculators that you can just put in, here's my voltage source, here's my LED specs, what resistors do I need, can I do them series or parallel, etc, etc. Also, for those who don't deal with electronic stuff much, you'll hear volts, amps, and watts. So let's use the water metaphor for electricity. There are so many different ways this gets done, but essentially voltage is water pressure, amperage is water volume. But I think it's actually easier if I just explain it directly. So, a battery will put out a constant voltage. In the case of a AA battery, that is 1.5 volts. Some rechargeables only put out 1.2, which is why some devices say do not use rechargeables. If they need the full 3 volts from two AA's, you need to have two 1.5 volt AA's. And the amount of volts that a battery puts out doesn't change. The amount of amps that a circuit uses is controlled by the components. So they pull the amps rather than having them pushed. So volts are pushed. If you connect a 5 volt line to a circuit, that circuit is getting 5 volts. So batteries have a specific voltage rating that they will just push. And they have a rating in amp hours or milliamp hours a lot more often when you're dealing with electronics that you should be touching, to be honest. So an amp hour is a current draw of 1 amp being pulled for 1 hour. So that is the part that is much more variable. The amp hours are how much Go is stored inside a battery. Let me just look up my phone specs. About phone, blah blah blah, battery information. So my phone has a 4,000 milliamp hour battery. I don't know the voltage. I don't need to know the voltage. Now let me pull up specs on a AA battery. AA's are fairly standardized. Like, that's kind of the point of the AA specification. Oh look, Energizer AA alkaline battery, 1.5 volts. Oh come on, you know you want to give me the amps. Energizer's official data sheets. This is weird to look at. Apparently 3,500 milliamp hours maximum for the Energizer. Oh, that's the ultimate lithium. That'll, of course, be spicier. So yeah, the ultimate lithium gives you 3,500 milliamp hours of 1.5 volts. Standard Energizer, max alkaline. Give me numbers. Technical information. Up to 3,000 milliamp hours if you're discharging it at 25 milliamps. But if you discharge it at 500 milliamps, it's only got about 2,000 milliamp hours. So one of the things with double A's is you pull on it harder, it discharges quicker. And it effectively has less capacity if you pull harder, because weird interaction between electrical physics and chemical physics. It's a very weird corner of things. Yeah, so the way that you get more power out of batteries, so the thing where you have multiple double A's in a thing, if they are in series, so the positive end of battery 1 connects to the negative of battery 2, then you add together their voltages and average their milliamps. So 2 double A's in series, which is the usual setup you get, is a 3 volt source. 2 double A batteries in parallel, so the positive terminal of both batteries goes to the circuit positive rail. You keep the voltages and you don't mix the voltages. So this will be a 1.5 volt source, but you add together the amps. So if you've got 2,000 milliamp sources in parallel, you have 4,000 milliamps of draw before it goes flat. And watts, which are the other thing that get expressed in hours, you get watt hours. A watt is a volt times an amp. It's just to combine everything through to get the total power level, more or less. And we are coming in towards our turn towards Cairns, so we're getting closer to the end of things. Attention passengers, we're now approaching Cairns, and I've switched on the seatbelt lights, which means I'd like you to fasten your seatbelts. Enjoy this riddle and more as we come in towards landing, and thank you again for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Okay. Descent checklist. Anti-ice system is off. Inertial separator handle is normal. QNH is set. Nav source is set. Let's start off with I think 3,500 feet sounds good for our descent in towards Cairns. Let's set that to 135. Cairns Tower, Martel 23 is 19 miles east, 7,700 feet, with information goal to land. Fly left traffic, runway 15, Martel 23. Okay, so we start our approach in towards Cairns International Airport. I think it's an international airport. Let me pull up the charts, which I should have had open already. I've been getting a little slack with the charts lately. Yes, Cairns International. Ooh, 3 different apron charts. Domestic, international, and general aviation. So, we're coming in for runway 15, which is mostly coming in from the north. but we're doing a left traffic pattern, which means that we will be stopping before we get to the airport and turning right to enter the left traffic pattern. And it looks like we'll be turning right off the runway to reach the general aviation terminal, since we are not a domestic airline. But there's some lovely general aviation apron and terminal for our parking needs, so that looks fun. And let me check the elevation stuff. Okay, so all of those mountains that we're seeing just beyond the airport, we will in fact be doing our approach from almost entirely over the water, because Cairns Airport is on that little spit of land before even that first mountain there. And, you know, being directly in front of us because we're flying directly at it. And the runway elevation is 9 feet at the runway 15 end and 8 feet at runway 33 end. So that's quite low. And let's see if I can find the pattern altitude. Flying in 270. Want to be getting down a little bit. Not on that chart. I believe the pattern altitude should be approximately 1,000 feet. It's typically 1,000 feet above runway elevation, so let's enter at 15. And we definitely want to be pulling back a little bit on the power. Mostly back to idle, just to get us down. We are entering the... Okay, so approach checklist. Seatbelt lights are on. Landing lights, we are entering the traffic area, so they go on. Fuel tank selectors, both on. Prop RPM is at max. Fuel condition, high idle. Now, okay, our flap speed is 150, so flaps to the approach position, which will also give us a bit more drag and help us pull in a little. Oh, not that steep, please. Oh, that feeling when the autopilot feels a bit more sudden of a change than it was planning and drops the nose. So that extra bit of drag slowed us right down, so I've put the engine back to a bit more power to control the descent a bit better. Heading 330, just double check that. Runway heading exact is... Give me the numbers. There are so many charts, it's kind of wild. I'm just going to go with 330 for our engaging across to the traffic pattern entry. And the speed's coming back to about 100 knots, so we're controlling that. And this is why one of the standard procedures when you are doing an approach into anywhere is that you brief the approach. And here we go, it is on page 2 of the aerodrome chart. And yes, Cairns Airport is one of those rare treats where the runway for the runway heading for runway 330, runway 33 is exactly 330. Rare treat that. Canberra Airport's runway 35 is at 348. Essentially, it's what multiple of 10 is closer. Now let's... There's our landing clearance already. Cleared to land runway 15, Martel 23. But let's just load up the RNAV, the LNAV guidance on this little thing, just to give us some nice guidance. That. So our nav path is now set for if we needed to engage the localizer, but if we are doing a traffic pattern style landing, we are basically well set up for that. Okay. And let's take off the autopilot at this point, and we will start our base turn. Final approach checklist. Seatbelt lights on. Flaps to land. And I think we'll do a nice hand-flown approach for this. But we will turn on the nav mode so that the flight directors are giving us the good information, and we want to be getting down a little bit. And we've got our landing clearance, so we are fine to do the base leg turn. And set a projected a landing altitude of 2000 and set the autopilot up to give us that direction, but here we are. And in fact I'm going to engage autopilot on the approach mode just to give us some no, it does not want to engage approach mode if we are not actually loaded onto the approach. That's fine. We are visual, we are comfortable, flaps are down, we are bringing the speed back slightly. I need 3 hands. I need to bring OBS back up so that I can check that the stream is still 500. Functioning properly.
500.
I definitely need to look at getting a 3rd small monitor just to put OBS on. Okay. We're a little higher than we'd like. We're fine. There's the medium marker. We've had no go-around calls. The runway is clear. The crosswind is slightly spicy. Coming in gently. Easing back the throttle. Pulling up into the flare gently. We want to stay descending, but just do it softer. We're off the centre line, but that's okay. We've got plenty of runway. This is an international airport and we are but one plane. Oh, lovely and smooth onto the tarmac there. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Okay, lightly squirrely as the nose wheel tries to roll out from under us. There's a little bit more to that than we thought there might be. And just gently engaging the brakes. And now doing our rollout to the next taxiway. Here we go. And as we come across. We pull ourselves just past the runway stop bar, because that stop bar is for when you're entering. Now, parking brake on. Going to ground on 121.7, Martel 23, goodbye. Okay, after landing checklist, flaps up, anti-ice is off, standby old power off. Attention passengers, we've landed safely in Cairns and the local time is 12:35 PM. Please remain seated until the plane comes to a complete stop at whichever ridiculous parking spot they give us, because queuing for the exit in an 8-seater makes you look even more ridiculous than normal. Before arrival taxi checklist. Taxi lights on, landing lights off, strobe lights off, seatbelt light on. Taxi clearance. Cairns ground, Martel 23, request taxi to parking. Taxiing to General Aviation parking via taxiway Alpha, Martel 23. Okay. Taxi clearance check. Inertial separator handle to bypass. Prop RPM to minimum, fuel condition to low idle, and we hear it wind down a little, and parking brake release. Before arrival taxi checklist complete. Oop, hold position. Holding position. We are in fact parked in exactly the wrong spot, such that the air traffic controller is glitching. So we are in fact going to, I believe it's that citation that's getting the hold position, continue position, just filling up the comm screen there. So interesting little bug, just because we were parked exactly on the wrong spot. But we've got a nice parking spot over here by this dingy looking warehouse looking thing, by these lovely little helipads. Towards our little spot here, and we obey the marshaller. There we go. Lovely little parking spot. Okay, parking brake set. Shutdown checklist. Parking brake set. Power lever idle. Bleed air switch off. ITT range acceptable. Prop RPM feather. Fuel condition lever cut. And the engine winds down. External lighting off. Seatbelt lights off. Attention passengers, this now concludes our flight from Townsville to Cairns, and we here at Martel Air hope you've enjoyed your time in our tiny skybus. Please wait until I've opened the door and you can calmly deplane in an orderly fashion. Our baggage handling services today will be provided by our wonderful passengers, so thank you for not leaving any of your luggage behind. Any personal belongings left behind as you leave the plane will be assumed to be a present to the co-pilot and enjoyed thoroughly. And if you would like to take a beverage with you, we have our coffee machine up by the back of the plane and linked in the description. If you would like to donate to the channel and to Wing Commander Lamington's dog treats habits. He is the goodest boy and he deserves all the treats. Thank you for flying Martel Air. We hope you don't die. Okay, internal lighting off. Fuel boost switch off. NG is at 0, check. Avionics 2 off. Avionics 1 off. Battery switch off. Fuel tank selectors both off. Shutdown checklist complete. So there is our flight successfully to Cairns International Airport and parked up lovely. Hopefully you have enjoyed the slightly disjointed ramblings about my cosplay projects. I think there was a tangent. I was going to talk about aircraft names. Well, that is a tangent to carry over to next week, as I got distracted halfway through a sentence and never went back. See, this is why you should be here for the live stream part of it, so you can remind me what tangents I've forgotten and prompt me on interesting things. But hopefully you enjoyed the ramblings about cosplay, Star Wars prop design, basic electronics, and whatever else it is that I went through in that little list. And hopefully you've enjoyed the stream, and hopefully I will see you all next week. Goodbye.